Sword Art Online is a terrible anime, and the fictional game at the center of it is even worse. The whole thing feels lazy and careless. The story wants you to believe this is some huge online world that trapped thousands of players, but nothing about it feels real. The rules are unclear, the systems make no sense, and the way people act inside the game feels nothing like how real players act. It is hard to take any of it seriously. It is obvious the writer has never played an online game before. The game design itself is laughable and shallow. The result is a series that pretends to be about gaming but does not understand gaming at all. It uses the idea of an online world as a costume, not as a living system. That failure sits at the heart of the show, and it drags everything else down with it. The reason why the game design is so terrible is because it is artificial intelligence slop. That is not a theory or conjecture. It is not a guess. The show itself literally says that. It is stated outright that the Cardinal system has an automated quest generator. The show explains that it gathers legends and folklore from around the world through the network. It takes proper nouns and story patterns from those sources and uses them to generate endless quests. The series presents this as something impressive. In reality, it exposes how shallow the game design really is. Quests built by scraping myths and reassembling them are not meaningful design. They are stitched together fragments. Real quest design requires structure, pacing, and context within the world. It requires understanding how players will approach objectives, how rewards shape behavior, and how stories tie into larger systems. Simply pulling names and patterns from old legends and rearranging them does not create depth. It creates recycled content with a thin coat of paint. The idea that this system can generate infinite quests sounds impressive at first. But in practice, infinite content usually means low-quality content. Without careful human direction, those quests would quickly become repetitive. Players would notice patterns. They would find exploits. They would optimize the fun out of it. Any online community would break down formulaic content in days. The show treats automation as a replacement for craftsmanship, as if quantity can make up for lack of thought. It also raises serious problems the story ignores. If the system pulls directly from global folklore, that means it is blending cultural myths into a commercial product without context or care. Legends have meaning within their own histories. Stripping them down to names and plot shapes to feed an algorithm reduces them to raw material. The show does not question this. It presents it as a clever feature instead of a hollow shortcut. By admitting that the quest system is automated and built from scraped myths, the series confirms that the game world is not carefully authored. It is assembled by pattern matching. That may sound advanced, but it only makes the setting feel more artificial and less believable. Instead of a living online world shaped by developers and players, it becomes a machine remixing old stories on demand. That is not compelling design. It is mechanical and lazy. And that is where the artificial intelligence slop part comes in. If the Cardinal system can generate an infinite number of quests, then most of them are going to be garbage. There is no way around that. Infinite output means no filter, no care, and no quality control. It means the system is throwing out content nonstop, whether it is good or not. Artificial intelligence cannot understand meaning, cannot understand why a story works, cannot understand emotional weight, pacing, or payoff. Copies patterns. It rearranges pieces. It mimics structure. That is not the same as creating something thoughtful. When you rely on automation to produce endless quests, you are choosing speed over substance. You are accepting that most of what comes out will be shallow and repetitive. In any real online game, players burn through weak content fast. They skip dialogue. They search for the fastest reward. They break the system down to numbers and routes. If the majority of quests are formula-based and stitched together from recycled myths, players will see through it quickly. They will notice the same story beats, the same objectives, the same reward loops. The magic disappears once the pattern is exposed. The show acts as if infinite generation equals richness. In reality, it usually means bloat. A world packed with low-effort tasks does not feel alive. Feels cluttered. Feels like busy work. Without careful design and human oversight, the content becomes noise. Quantity drowns out quality. So when the series openly states that an automated system scrapes folklore and spins out endless quests, it is not showing depth. It is admitting that the backbone of the game runs on mass-produced filler. That is the definition of artificial intelligence slop. Endless content with no soul, no restraint, and no real craft behind it. And the show itself proves how messy and nonsensical the system is. You do not even have to wonder or speculate. The quests and rewards we see on screen already break their own logic. A clear example is Excalibur being used as a reward in a game that is supposed to be based on Norse mythology. That alone should make anyone stop and think. Excalibur comes from Arthurian legend. It is tied to King Arthur, medieval Britain, and a completely different mythological and cultural framework. Norse mythology revolves around figures like Odin, Thor, Loki, and realms like Asgard and Midgard. These are distinct traditions with their own themes, cosmology, and symbolism. Mixing them randomly is not creative fusion. It is careless blending with no respect for internal consistency. If the game is meant to be Norse-themed, then its legendary weapons should come from Norse sources. You would expect artifacts tied to Odin or Thor, not a sword from British legend. Dropping Excalibur into that setting breaks immersion. It signals that the system is not carefully curated. It is pulling famous names because they are recognizable, not because they fit the world. This is exactly what happens when content is generated without thoughtful oversight. The algorithm recognizes that Excalibur is a famous legendary sword, so it inserts it as a high-tier reward. It does not understand cultural context. It does not understand thematic cohesion. It just matches patterns. Famous sword plus fantasy setting equals reward. That is shallow logic. A well-designed game world maintains internal consistency. Even when it draws from multiple mythologies, it does so deliberately with clear structure and explanation. Sword Art Online does not present it that way. Feels random. It feels like a system grabbing recognizable elements from different sources and tossing them together. So when people claim the world is deep or carefully constructed, examples like this say otherwise. The inconsistency is visible on screen. It is not subtle. It reinforces the idea that the system is not guided by thoughtful design, but by automated pattern matching that prioritizes recognition over coherence. The system does not care about accuracy or whether anything actually makes sense. It simply takes material stories, names, mechanics, and patterns, and blends it together without thought, oversight, or understanding. It does not question whether a quest fits the world, whether a skill is balanced, or whether a story beat is coherent. Its goal is purely output, to produce content endlessly, regardless of quality or logic. Because of that, much of what it generates is shallow, contradictory, or nonsensical. Characters might act in ways that conflict with their established traits. Quests might reward items that do not fit the theme of the setting. Skills may be impossible to train or wildly overpowered. There is no intention behind it, no awareness of narrative, gameplay, or player experience. Everything is stitched together mechanically, as though quantity matters more than meaning. This approach is what makes artificial intelligence slop so obvious. When content is generated without care for consistency, culture, or rules, it creates a world that looks populated but feels hollow. Names, locations, and items might seem familiar, but the connections between them are arbitrary. It prioritizes pattern recognition over logic, and as a result, players or viewers experience a fragmented, incoherent universe. In short, the creativity of the system is only an illusion. It does not produce thoughtful content, cannot judge whether a quest, skill, or character is meaningful. It only assembles pieces and calls it a world. That is why the results are sloppy, inconsistent, and ultimately unsatisfying. In real game development, artificial intelligence can help with small tasks. It can control enemy behavior or adjust difficulty in limited ways. It does not replace structured design. It does not magically create a fair and stable online world for thousands of players. A live online game needs constant oversight, patches, moderation, and human direction. It needs people checking for exploits, bugs, and broken mechanics. The show ignores all of this and pretends that a single advanced system can handle everything perfectly. That is not how games work. The series even admits that systems are generated and managed automatically, yet it expects the viewer to believe that this massive death game runs without collapsing. No serious thought is given to server strain, balance issues, griefing, or players finding ways to abuse mechanics. In any real online game, players would tear apart poorly designed systems within hours. Here, artificial intelligence is treated like a magic fix for every flaw. It becomes a shield that protects the writer from having to explain anything. Calling it artificial intelligence does not make it deep. It just highlights how little effort went into designing a believable game. When the show openly says that much of the world runs on automated creation, it confirms the problem. The game is not carefully built. It is a vague idea propped up by a buzzword that makes the setting feel even more hollow and poorly thought out. And if the cardinal system is automatically generating quests, you have to wonder what else it handles. The show already says it can create content on its own. So why stop at quests? The game also claims to have an unlimited number of skills, outside of magic. That alone should raise alarms. There is no realistic way a small team of developers could handcraft and balance an endless list of skills. Every skill in an online game has to be coded, tested, tuned, and checked against every other system. Damage values, cooldowns, resource costs, synergy with gear, interaction with party roles, edge cases with status effects. The amount of work multiplies fast. Even large studios struggle to balance a few dozen skill trees. An unlimited set is not just ambitious. It is unmanageable. So the clear implication is that those skills are also generated by the system. That makes the problem even worse. If an artificial intelligence is producing abilities the same way it produces quests, then the balance would collapse. Players would find broken combinations in hours. They would stack effects the system did not predict. They would exploit unintended interactions. That is how online communities operate. They test limits constantly. If new skills are being generated without careful human control, the game would turn into chaos almost immediately. The show avoids this reality by simply declaring that the system works. It assumes that automation equals perfection. There is no serious look at how these skills are moderated, patched, or removed if they are too strong. There is no evidence of developers stepping in to fix exploits. The world runs as if artificial intelligence is flawless and all-powerful. But real systems are not flawless. The more automated they are, the more unpredictable they become. An endless stream of artificial intelligence-generated skills would not create depth. It would create imbalance, confusion, and constant abuse of mechanics. Once again, the series uses automation as a shield to avoid explaining how anything actually functions. Instead of thoughtful design, it leans on a vague machine that supposedly handles everything. That does not make the world feel advanced. It makes it feel poorly thought out. It is almost funny how the show presents this as some kind of breakthrough feature. The cardinal system is framed as advanced, efficient, even brilliant. The idea that it can generate quests, manage systems, and possibly even create skills on its own is treated like proof that the game is ahead of its time. The characters speak about it with respect. The tone suggests this is innovation at its peak. In reality, it would make the game terrible. Automation on that scale does not guarantee quality. It removes control. A live online game depends on careful limits. Designers set boundaries for a reason. They shape the experience, guide progression, and prevent chaos. If a system is free to create endless content and mechanics without strict oversight, then the result is not depth. It is noise. It is an imbalance. It is inconsistent. An advanced feature should solve problems. This one would create them. Infinite quests would drown players in repetitive filler. Infinite skills would break balance and reward abuse. Automated story generation would strip the world of intent. Instead of a crafted experience, players would be wandering through a pile of algorithmic output. There would be no clear vision holding it together. What makes it worse is that the show does not seem aware of this flaw. It does not treat the system as risky or unstable. It treats it as impressive. That gap between how it is presented and how it would actually function is hard to ignore. The more the series praises the automation, the more it highlights how little thought went into what that automation would mean for a real online game. So yes, it is funny in a way. The very feature meant to show how advanced the world is ends up exposing how fragile and poorly designed it would be. The show calls it progress. In practice, it would turn the game into a mess. It would just lead to slop. There is no other honest way to describe it. If a system is built to produce endless quests, endless skills, endless variations of content, then most of that content will be low quality. That is how mass generation works. When output becomes the priority, standards fall. There is no careful selection, no real editing, no strong sense of direction. The machine keeps producing, and the game keeps filling up with filler. The vast majority of the content would be awful. Quests would blur together. The same rescue mission with a different name. The same monster hunt with minor stat changes. The same story beats copied from myths and rearranged. Players would start to recognize the formula. Once that happens, the illusion collapses. What looked like a rich world becomes a pattern generator. And if the system can generate an infinite amount of quests, a lot of them would be nonsensical and make no sense. That is the unavoidable outcome of mass generation without strict human control. When a machine is told to keep producing content endlessly, it will prioritize output over coherence. It will stitch together story fragments, objectives, and character motivations without fully understanding how they fit together. The result would be quests that contradict the rules of the world, break immersion, or collapse under basic scrutiny. You would see missions with unclear goals, rewards that do not match the effort required, villains with no logical motive, or events that ignore established lore. One quest might portray a region as peaceful and prosperous, while another generated minutes later describes it as destroyed by war. An algorithm does not truly grasp continuity. It matches patterns. It imitates structure. It does not care if the outcome feels natural or believable. Over time, players would notice the cracks. Dialogue would feel repetitive or oddly phrased. Plot twists would appear out of nowhere. Emotional moments would lack weight because they were assembled from templates rather than built with intent. Even basic cause and effect relationships could break down. A quest might reference events that never happened or characters that were never introduced properly. In a real online game, that kind of inconsistency would destroy immersion. Players expect a world to follow its own rules. They expect progression to make sense. If the majority of quests are algorithmically generated without oversight, the world stops feeling like a crafted experience and starts feeling like a malfunctioning machine. Instead of adventure, you get confusion. Instead of depth, you get randomness. So no, it would not be impressive. It would not feel advanced. It would feel broken. Infinite generation without meaningful control does not create a rich world. It creates a pile of disconnected, often nonsensical content that erodes the very foundation of the experience. The same problem applies to skills and mechanics. If abilities are being created automatically, many of them would either be useless or broken. Some would be weak and ignored. Others would be overpowered and abused until the entire balance of the game revolves around them. A real development team would have to step in constantly to fix problems. But the show treats the system as self-sufficient, as if it never produces junk. An online world filled with mostly bad content would not feel epic or immersive. It would feel bloated. Players would dig through piles of repetitive tasks to find the few worthwhile experiences. Most of their time would be spent filtering out garbage. That is not good design. That is excess without discipline. The irony is that the show presents this endless generation as a strength. In practice, it would guarantee that quality is rare. When everything can be produced without limit, very little of it has value. And how would you even train most of the skills in this game if there are an unlimited amount of them? That question alone exposes how poorly thought out the system is. In any real online game, skills are limited for a reason. Developers design progression paths carefully. They decide how long it should take to level a skill, what actions increase proficiency, what the caps are, and how those skills interact with others. That structure gives players direction and balance. If there are unlimited skills, the progression system collapses under its own weight. How does a player even discover new abilities? Are they randomly generated on the fly? Do they unlock based on obscure actions? If so, players would constantly stumble into strange, poorly explained abilities with no clear training method. That is not depth. That is confusion. Take a simple example. If there were a niche skill like advanced rope tying or improvised shield throwing, how would you train it? Do you just repeat the same action hundreds of times? What determines mastery? If skills are being generated automatically, the system would also have to generate the rules for leveling them, the experience curves, and the thresholds for improvement. That is an enormous amount of balancing work. Without human oversight, many of those skills would either level up far too quickly or be nearly impossible to improve. Worse, some skills would likely be useless. Others would be absurdly overpowered. With no finite list and no strict control, players would inevitably find broken combinations. They would grind specific actions to unlock overpowered abilities that the system did not properly balance. Entire metas would form around accidental exploits. The game would become a contest of who can break the algorithm fastest. And from a player perspective, an unlimited skill list removes meaning from progression. In most games, choosing a build matters because options are limited. There are trade-offs. There are strengths and weaknesses. If there are endless skills, specialization becomes meaningless because there is always something new being generated. The sense of mastery disappears when the horizon keeps moving with no structure. So the idea sounds grand on paper. Unlimited skills, endless freedom, infinite customization. In practice, it would be chaotic, unbalanced, and deeply frustrating. It would not feel like a carefully crafted system. It would feel like a machine constantly spitting out mechanics that no one fully understands or controls. And how would PvP even function in a system with an unlimited number of skills? Competitive balance in any multiplayer game depends on predictability within limits. Players do not need to know every detail of a build, but they need a general understanding of what is possible. There has to be a defined pool of abilities so that strategy, counterplay, and preparation actually mean something. If skills are infinite and potentially artificial intelligence generated, then there is no stable meta. You would walk into a duel with no idea what your opponent is capable of. They would have no idea what you can do either. That does not create depth. It creates randomness. Strategy becomes guesswork. Victory would depend less on planning and more on who happened to unlock the more absurd ability. And what if someone has a skill that can instantly one-hit kill anyone? In a properly designed game, something that powerful would either not exist or would come with extreme trade-offs, rare conditions, or heavy cooldowns. It would be tested, patched, and adjusted repeatedly. But in a system that generates skills automatically, who is making sure that kind of ability never appears? Who is stress testing every new combination against thousands of others? With unlimited skills, the risk of broken interactions grows exponentially. One ability might reduce all incoming damage by 90%. Another might stack damage multipliers in unintended ways. Another might ignore defensive stats entirely. When those abilities collide in PvP, the result would be chaos. Matches would be decided by whoever stumbled onto the most broken synergy, not by skill or tactics. Competitive environments require constraints. They require defined systems so players can learn, adapt, and improve. If everything is constantly shifting and new, unpredictable abilities are appearing, then mastery becomes impossible. There is no stable foundation to build skill upon. PvP would feel less like a test of player ability and more like a lottery. So the idea of unlimited skills might sound exciting on paper, but in practice it would destroy any meaningful competitive balance. Without strict limits and human oversight, PvP would not be tense or strategic. It would be unfair, inconsistent, and ultimately unplayable. And a lot of the non-player characters are probably artificial intelligence generated as well. The show hints at this through examples like the daughter of the main characters, who appears to be fully artificial intelligence. If she can exist as a believable, interactive character without human input, it stands to reason that countless other NPCs in the game are created in the same way. They are not designed or fleshed out by a writer. They are churned out by the system. This adds another layer to the problems with the world building. NPCs are supposed to make a game world feel alive. They give players interaction, challenge, and immersion. But when they are artificial intelligence generated with little oversight, they risk feeling hollow, inconsistent, or unnatural. Dialogue might be stilted, reactions might not make sense, and their presence in the story could feel mechanical. Instead of enriching the game world, they become another product of mass-generated slop. The daughter character is an especially striking example because she is central enough to the story that viewers are meant to care about her. Yet she is presented as fully artificial intelligence, which implies that a system, rather than human creativity, is responsible for her behavior, dialogue, and personality. That raises questions about how meaningful the other NPCs can be. If one important character is entirely generated by artificial intelligence, then hundreds or thousands of lesser characters are likely produced in the same way. This approach further highlights the laziness of the writing and the over-reliance on automation. NPCs are not small details. They are essential to the believability of a game world. When so many are artificial intelligence generated, it turns the world into a hollow shell where interactions are formulaic and characters lack depth. The result is a setting that looks populated but is actually lifeless, mechanical, and ultimately unconvincing. And then there is an even stranger detail. We see cases where the cardinal system creates quests that are clearly based on The Ring and Friday the 13th. These are modern horror films. They are not ancient myths. They are not public domain folklore passed down over centuries. They are copyrighted works owned by companies. The Ring is a film tied to a specific production and rights holder. Friday the 13th is a long-running horror franchise with protected characters and branding. These are not vague campfire stories. They are commercial properties. If the cardinal system is pulling from them, then it is not just remixing folklore. It is copying protected material. The show already claims that the system gathers legends and folklore from around the world through the network. That alone is questionable in terms of ethics and context. But once you see it draw from modern films, the excuse collapses. Those works are not in the public domain. They are not free to use. So the implication is that the system is scraping copyrighted stories and turning them into in-game content. In other words, the cardinal system is not just generating quests. It is stealing intellectual property. It is lifting ideas, themes, and possibly even recognizable elements from works that belong to someone else. In the real world, that would lead to lawsuits. It would be a legal disaster. No serious company would build a live online game that automatically copies copyrighted media without permission. Yet the show treats this as clever. It frames it as proof that the system is creative and far-reaching. Instead of raising legal or ethical concerns, it presents the feature as impressive. That makes the whole concept feel even more careless. The more the series tries to show how advanced the system is, the more it exposes how poorly thought out the implications are. So the problem is twofold. Not only is the system creating slop, endlessly producing low-quality quests, skills, and mechanics, it is actively stealing content at the same time. It is not just lazy or poorly designed, it is outright taking material that belongs to someone else and repackaging it as its own. The fact that it pulls from modern films like The Ring or Friday the 13th shows that this is not accidental. The system is presented as creative, but in reality it is copying wholesale. This makes the game world feel even more hollow. Players are supposed to believe that this massive online world is rich and original, when in fact much of it would be derivative garbage lifted from other sources. The artificial intelligence is not building depth. It is patching together existing stories without thought or acknowledgement. It is not just producing filler. It is producing stolen filler. In a real-world scenario, this would be catastrophic. Any company releasing a game that automatically copies copyrighted works would face lawsuits, massive fines, and likely a shutdown of the game. The show ignores all of that and acts as if the theft is clever. That attitude highlights the carelessness at the heart of the design. The cardinal system is not impressive. It is lazy, reckless, and morally dubious. The slop it produces is bad enough, but the fact that it does so by stealing content adds another layer of failure to the world building. If this were a real game, it would get sued into oblivion. A system that automatically scrapes copyrighted works like The Ring or Friday the 13th and turns them into in-game quests would not fly in the real world. Companies that own these properties are extremely aggressive about protecting their intellectual property. They monitor for any unauthorized use and act quickly when something infringes on their rights. A live online game using stolen IP at scale would be a legal nightmare. Real companies like Disney and Paramount are already sending cease and desist letters to artificial intelligence developers who try to create software that generates content using the properties they own. They are making it clear that just because an algorithm produces something automatically does not mean it is free from liability. Automated generation does not grant immunity. The law treats the use of copyrighted material seriously, even if a machine did the copying. If the cardinal system actually existed, these companies would move immediately to shut it down. A lawsuit would be inevitable, and damages could be astronomical. The game would never launch, and if it did, it would face constant takedown requests for every piece of content that infringed on existing IP. That reality is completely ignored by the show. Instead, the series frames this as a clever feature, which makes the world building feel even more reckless. It is not a futuristic marvel. It is a fantasy built on legal impossibilities and lazy shortcuts. The contrast is stark. In the real world, creating content by scraping copyrighted works is risky, expensive, and potentially devastating. In the show, it is a convenient plot device. That gap between fantasy and reality highlights how careless the writing is when it comes to even basic rules of intellectual property. The show openly admits to this theft and treats it like it is an advanced feature. It does not hide the fact that the cardinal system is pulling stories, characters, and ideas from existing works and turning them into quests. Instead of acknowledging the ethical or legal problems, the series presents it as clever, innovative, and even impressive. The theft is framed as a technical achievement rather than a blatant shortcut. It is absurd when you think about it. Copying the intellectual property of someone else in the real world would get you sued immediately. Yet in the show, it is treated as a selling point. The artificial intelligence is praised for being able to generate content on its own. But what it is really doing is scavenging other work and repackaging it. That is not creativity. It is laziness disguised as innovation. By presenting this as a strength, the show reveals how little effort went into actual game design. The system does not need to consider balance, storytelling, or player engagement in a meaningful way because it can just rip material from existing sources. That is not advanced. That is reckless and sloppy. It undermines the credibility of the game world, and it exposes the lack of understanding of both real game development and intellectual property law. The more the show glorifies this feature, the more it highlights the core problem. The artificial intelligence is not a tool for building a living world. It is a machine for stealing and repurposing content while pretending to be smart. It is not impressive. It is another example of how poorly conceived the whole premise of the game is. In the real world, people in the creative industry are already exhausted from fighting to protect their work. Artists, writers, musicians, and designers spend years developing their skills. They build styles, voices, and ideas that are uniquely theirs. When their work is scraped, copied, or fed into systems without consent, it feels like theft because it is theft. It strips away ownership and reduces their effort to raw material for output. There have been ongoing disputes over artificial intelligence systems being trained on copyrighted art, novels, scripts, and music without permission. Many creators have spoken out because they see their livelihoods threatened. They are not angry at technology itself. They are angry at the lack of consent and the normalization of copying under the excuse of automation. For them, it is not an abstract debate. It is their career. Sword Art Online ignores all of that. The cardinal system openly pulls from legends, folklore, and even modern copyrighted works, and the story treats this as impressive. There is no discussion of consent, no acknowledgement of ownership, no recognition that using the stories of someone else without permission would be unethical and illegal. It is framed as a clever feature instead of what it would actually be, large-scale plagiarism. That attitude feels detached from reality. In a time when real creators are fighting to protect their work, presenting automated content scraping as a triumph comes across as careless. It glosses over the harm such a system would cause. It treats intellectual property as an endless resource to be mined rather than something created by individuals who deserve respect and protection. The result is a story that seems indifferent to the struggles of real artists and writers. While people in the real world are pushing back against unauthorized artificial intelligence training and stolen content, Sword Art Online builds a central system around that exact concept and celebrates it. That disconnect makes the premise feel not just poorly thought out, but tone-deaf to the realities of creative labor. It says a lot when the author is too lazy or unimaginative to design his own world, so he leaves it to artificial intelligence. Creating a fictional universe requires thought, care, and originality. It requires imagining systems, societies, mechanics, and rules that make sense within that world. If the writer cannot be bothered to do that and instead relies on a machine to generate quests, skills, and story beats, it shows a lack of creativity and commitment. The result is a hollow setting that feels prefabricated and lifeless, because the human touch, the thought that gives a world depth, is missing. At that point, one has to ask, why become an author at all? If you are not actually coming up with the ideas, if you are letting a machine handle the imagination, then the work is not truly yours. You are no longer shaping the world, guiding the story, or wrestling with the challenges that make storytelling meaningful. You are simply curating the output of an algorithm, hoping it looks coherent enough to pass as original. That is not authorship. It is outsourcing the core of the creative process and pretending you did it yourself. A world created this way is shallow because it lacks intentionality. Characters do not behave consistently. Quests exist only to fill space. Systems are unbalanced and implausible. When the creator is not thinking critically about the world, there is no soul to the setting. Everything is reactive, mechanical, and derivative. The audience may see spectacle, but they cannot feel the world as real or lived in. So relying on artificial intelligence for the core of your story is not clever, it is an admission of failure. The writer is abandoning the responsibility that comes with being an author. They are giving up on imagination, originality, and craft, and leaving a machine to do the heavy lifting. That is why the world of Sword Art Online feels so empty and why the Cardinal system, as a plot device, ends up highlighting the laziness at the heart of the writing. And the fact that the author openly admits that artificial intelligence was used to fully generate all of the systems in Sword Art Online should be embarrassing. Any real author, any creator who takes pride in their work, would never openly confess to outsourcing the core of their world building to a machine. Designing a game world, crafting quests, creating skills, and populating it with characters is supposed to be the foundation of storytelling. It is the work that shows thought, creativity, and care. To admit that a machine did all of that is essentially admitting that none of the creative effort came from the author. It is not just lazy, it undermines the credibility of the story. Readers or viewers are supposed to be immersed in a world that feels lived in and consistent. When the author says openly that every system was generated automatically, it reveals that the depth, logic, and structure of the world are artificial. There was no deliberate design, no balancing, no intentional narrative weaving. Everything is left to an algorithm that does not understand story, player behavior, or emotional impact. A serious author would frame artificial intelligence as a tool, not the primary creator. They might use it to assist with tedious tasks, research, or small parts of the design, but never to replace the thought, imagination, and effort that go into constructing the core systems of a fictional world. Admitting otherwise is like showing your hand in a poker game. You are revealing that the entire premise of your skill and imagination is built on shortcuts. In short, the admission should be embarrassing because it exposes the central flaw of the series. The world is not the product of a human mind. It is generated by a machine. That is the opposite of authorship. It turns a story that should showcase creativity into a showcase of laziness, and anyone who values storytelling should find that shocking. The author is fortunate that Sword Art Online came out over a decade ago. When it was first released, artificial intelligence was not part of the public conversation the way it is now. Most people were not thinking about automated content generation, data scraping, or algorithmic storytelling. The flaws in the world building and systems could be dismissed as creative license or simple oversight. The discussion around artificial intelligence slop did not exist yet. If the series were released today, the reaction would likely be very different. With how common artificial intelligence writing tools have become, and with how sensitive people are to algorithmically generated content, many viewers would immediately question whether parts of the story were machine-produced. The reliance on automated systems inside the narrative, the shallow quest design, the repetitive structure, and the derivative elements would raise obvious suspicions. People would not just criticize the logic of the world. They would question the authorship itself. And given how openly the series presents the cardinal system as generating entire systems automatically, that suspicion would not be unreasonable. When a story depicts its own world as built by automation, and that world feels hollow or inconsistent, it invites comparison to real-world artificial intelligence writing. The line between satire and self-exposure becomes thin. Audiences today are far more aware of how algorithmic content feels, formulaic, repetitive, and stitched together from existing tropes. In the current climate, where creators are scrutinized for originality and authenticity, a story like this would face heavy backlash. Critics would analyze the structure, compare it to known artificial intelligence patterns, and question whether the narrative was crafted carefully or assembled mechanically. The author would have to defend the work in a way that was not necessary years ago. Timing matters. Sword Art Online benefited from being released before the widespread discussion of artificial intelligence-generated slop. If it appeared today with the same flaws and the same heavy reliance on automated systems within its premise, the conversation would be much harsher. The accusations would come quickly, and many people would argue that the hollow feeling of the world reflects the very automation it glorifies. If Sword Art Online were a real game, nobody would play it. Players expect a game world to be carefully designed, balanced, and engaging, with quests, skills, and systems that make sense and reward effort. But in Sword Art Online, the cardinal system is doing all the work automatically, without oversight or thought. That means the majority of content would be shallow, inconsistent, or nonsensical. Quests could contradict each other. Skills could be impossible to train or wildly unbalanced, and NPCs would feel hollow and lifeless. Why would anyone spend hours grinding through a world like that when the creators themselves clearly did not put the time or care into building it? Games succeed because developers craft meaningful challenges, balanced progression, and immersive environments. They anticipate player behavior, test mechanics, and ensure that everything fits together logically. The artificial intelligence-generated everything approach of Sword Art Online bypasses all of that. It prioritizes quantity over quality, producing endless content that is mostly unplayable or uninteresting. In reality, players would quickly lose interest. Frustration from broken systems, unfair encounters, and illogical quests would outweigh any novelty. Instead of feeling immersed in a living world, players would feel like they are interacting with a chaotic, unpolished simulation. No matter how flashy the visuals or hyped the premise, a game built this way would fail because the human effort that makes play meaningful is missing entirely. The show pretends the system is impressive, but in a real-world context, it would be a disaster. It is truly baffling how anyone can genuinely like this show. When you look past the flashy visuals and the initial premise, there is absolutely nothing good about it. The story is shallow, the characters are underdeveloped, and the world feels artificial at best. The main plot revolves around a game that is poorly designed, filled with artificial intelligence-generated content and built on stolen or derivative material. None of it feels believable or engaging. The writing is lazy. Instead of crafting a compelling game world, the series relies on automation and shortcuts. Important events are contrived to highlight the main character, rather than arising naturally from the world or the systems the show pretends to care about. Everything is staged to make one person look heroic, and the surrounding environment exists only to prop him up. Even the so-called innovation of the cardinal system is hollow. It is presented as advanced, but in reality it produces slop, steals content, and removes any meaningful challenge or depth from the world. Instead of showcasing creativity, It exposes the laziness and lack of thought behind the series. The system is supposed to be impressive, but it only serves to highlight how poorly imagined the game is. Without a believable world, coherent systems, or characters with depth, the moments are superficial. There is nothing about the show that stands up to scrutiny. It is a hollow experience dressed up as adventure and innovation, and that is why it is hard to understand how anyone could genuinely enjoy it. Now, you might be saying, hey, wait a minute. You use artificial intelligence in your videos. You are a hypocrite for criticizing Sword Art Online for using it when you do it yourself. Let me stop you right there. Yes, I do use artificial intelligence in my videos. I am not going to deny that, but that is not what I am criticizing Sword Art Online for. I am not against artificial intelligence in general. I am criticizing the way the show uses it. There is a big difference. I use artificial intelligence as a tool to help speed up tedious parts of video creation. It might help me with tasks like editing and formatting scripts. It is a support tool. It does not create content by stealing work. It does not replace creativity. It does not pretend to be original while copying existing material. I am using it to make my own work more efficient, not to bypass the effort required to create something legitimate. All of the ideas and inputs still come from me. Artificial intelligence does not create the content on its own. I guide it, I choose what prompts to give it, and I shape the output into something meaningful. Every concept, every argument, every point in my videos originates with my research, my understanding, and my creativity. The artificial intelligence is only there to help organize or speed up repetitive and boring tasks. It does not decide the direction of the content, it does not invent the underlying ideas, and it does not replace the thinking process that goes into crafting a video. I also make sure to double-check all the information for accuracy. Artificial intelligence can make mistakes, get facts wrong, or misinterpret sources, so it is my responsibility to verify everything. I cross-reference with reliable sources, confirm dates and names, and make sure that any claims I present are backed by evidence. Nothing is simply copied or generated blindly. That extra step is essential because using artificial intelligence responsibly means maintaining control over the content, not blindly accepting whatever it produces. In short, artificial intelligence is a tool under my control, not a replacement for me. The creative choices, the research, the fact-checking, and the final product all come from me. It helps me work more efficiently, but the integrity, originality, and correctness of the content remain entirely my responsibility. That is why my use of artificial intelligence is fundamentally different from how Sword Art Online treats the cardinal system. Sword Art Online, on the other hand, treats artificial intelligence as a magical fix that can replace real design and original thought. The cardinal system is not assisting humans in meaningful ways. It is generating endless quests and skills, often by lifting stories from existing folklore and copyrighted works, and presenting them as original content in the game world. That is not a tool. That is a shortcut that relies on theft and sloppy mass production. So yes, artificial intelligence can be useful. Yes, I use it myself. But criticizing Sword Art Online is about accountability and intent, not the technology itself. Using artificial intelligence responsibly to help you work faster is not the same as using it to replace real design, steal IP, and pass off sloppy automated content as a fully realized world. The distinction is crucial. I use artificial intelligence as an assistance, not as a replacement. It helps me with tasks that are time-consuming, but at no point do I let it take over completely. Every step of the process is guided and overseen by me. I make creative decisions, I choose the direction, and I shape the output into something meaningful and coherent. The artificial intelligence is only a helper, a tool that speeds up parts of the work. It does not create the substance of the content on its own. I do not use artificial intelligence to fully generate everything without human oversight. Every piece of information, every argument, and every detail is checked, edited, and verified before it is presented. Nothing is left unexamined. Nothing is blindly accepted from the machine. That human oversight is critical because it ensures accuracy, clarity, and originality. It prevents the kind of sloppy or careless output that happens when an artificial intelligence is left to run unchecked. In essence, artificial intelligence for me is like a pen in my hand or a calculator in front of me. It assists, it speeds up work, but it cannot replace the human judgment, research, and effort that give the final product value. That is the fundamental difference between responsible artificial intelligence use and the way the cardinal system is depicted in Sword Art Online. There, the artificial intelligence is expected to run the entire game world on its own, without oversight, and the result is chaotic, shallow, and often stolen content. My use is deliberate, controlled, and accountable, which is the only way artificial intelligence should ever be used. At the end of the day, artificial intelligence is just a tool. It is not inherently good or bad. It is already being used in movies, TV shows, commercials, advertisements, and music videos to assist creators in speeding up certain processes, exploring ideas, or enhancing production value. Filmmakers use it for visual effects, editors use it to organize footage, and musicians can experiment with artificial intelligence-assisted sound design. In all of these cases, artificial intelligence helps humans work more efficiently, but the final creative decisions remain in human hands. How do you think I am able to make these long-form, hour-plus videos? The answer is simple: with the help of artificial intelligence. It is not magic or cheating. It is a tool that allows me to work more efficiently. Before artificial intelligence, I had to do everything manually. It all had to be done by hand. For a video of this length and depth, that process would easily take me over a month. Every small task added up, and the time commitment was enormous. Now, with artificial intelligence assistance, I can speed up many of these steps without sacrificing quality. This frees me to focus on the parts that really matter: crafting arguments, verifying facts, and shaping the narrative so that the video is coherent and informative. The artificial intelligence does not replace my work. It handles repetitive or time-consuming tasks so that I can put more energy into the creative and analytical parts. The difference is dramatic. A process that once took weeks can now be completed in a fraction of the time, allowing me to produce long, detailed videos more consistently. Importantly, the content is still entirely guided and overseen by me. I choose what goes into the video, verify the information, and make all the final decisions. Artificial intelligence is a productivity tool, not a substitute for creativity or responsibility. In other words, artificial intelligence allows me to focus on the value of the content rather than getting bogged down in tedious steps. That is why I can produce hour-long videos that are detailed, well-structured, and accurate, something that would have been impractical without this technology. It is an efficiency booster, not a replacement for skill, effort, or oversight. I am not against artificial intelligence itself. I am against the way Sword Art Online uses it. The cardinal system does not assist designers or add nuance. It fully generates content automatically, steals from existing works, and passes it off as original. That is not innovation. That is a shortcut that produces shallow, derivative, and often broken content. Like any tool, artificial intelligence can be used for good or bad. A hammer can build a house or destroy one. A paintbrush can create a masterpiece or a mess. Sword Art Online chooses to use artificial intelligence for bad. It replaces thoughtful design with mass-produced noise, disregards originality, and pretends that automation equals brilliance. The result is a game world that feels empty, inconsistent, and legally questionable. The distinction matters. Responsible use of artificial intelligence enhances human creativity and efficiency. Irresponsible use, like in Sword Art Online, undermines the very thing that gives a story or a game value: imagination, intentionality, and care. The show does not explore how artificial intelligence could be a helpful tool. It presents artificial intelligence as a crutch, a way to avoid doing the work that authors and designers should be doing themselves. That is why its use in the series is not just lazy, it is actively harmful to the credibility and depth of the world. There are plenty of good use cases for artificial intelligence. In the creative world, it can be a real lifeline. For example, singers who have lost their voices due to illness or injury can use artificial intelligence to clone their previous recordings and sing again. It allows them to continue performing, producing new music, or revisiting their old hits in ways that would otherwise be impossible. Artificial intelligence can extend artistic expression rather than replace it, giving creators tools to enhance what they already do. Beyond the arts, artificial intelligence has critical applications in science and medicine. It can detect diseases by analyzing medical images, identifying patterns that human eyes might miss, and flagging potential problems earlier than traditional methods. Artificial intelligence algorithms can help diagnose conditions from X-rays, MRIs, or even genetic data, allowing doctors to make more informed decisions and save lives. In these cases, artificial intelligence acts as an assistant, augmenting human capability rather than replacing it. There are also practical uses in research, data analysis, and engineering, where artificial intelligence can process massive amounts of information quickly, highlight insights, and reduce the time needed to reach conclusions. In all of these scenarios, the key is that artificial intelligence supports humans, rather than acting as a standalone creator. It works best when used responsibly, with oversight, verification, and a clear purpose. These examples show that artificial intelligence is not inherently bad. It can empower people, solve real problems, and enhance creativity. The issue is not the technology itself. It is how it is applied. Used properly, artificial intelligence can be transformative. Misused, as in Sword Art Online, it becomes sloppy, derivative, and even ethically questionable. The difference comes down entirely to intent and control. So do not bother criticizing me for using artificial intelligence in my videos, especially if you are a Sword Art Online fan. There is a big difference between using artificial intelligence responsibly and using it as a crutch to replace creativity entirely. I use artificial intelligence to assist me with tedious tasks, organize ideas, or speed up certain processes, but every idea, every argument, and every piece of content comes from me. I oversee everything, I check every fact, and I make all the creative decisions myself. The artificial intelligence is a helper, not the author. If you are defending Sword Art Online while attacking me for using artificial intelligence, you are missing the point. The problem is not the technology. The problem is intent and execution. Sword Art Online relies on artificial intelligence to generate quests, skills, and content automatically, often lifting from existing works and presenting it as original. That is lazy, reckless, and morally questionable. I am not doing that. I am not stealing ideas. I am not replacing creative thought. Criticizing me for using artificial intelligence is like criticizing a carpenter for using a saw while ignoring someone who built a house entirely out of prefabricated, poorly made materials and claimed it was their own design. One is a tool in skilled hands. The other is outsourcing your work to a machine and calling it art. Fans of Sword Art Online should understand that distinction before they try to call me a hypocrite. The difference is not subtle. It is the entire point of how responsible artificial intelligence use works versus lazy, careless automation. There is plenty of artificial intelligence-assisted content that is far better than Sword Art Online. For example, many K-pop music videos now use artificial intelligence to enhance visuals, plan choreography, or assist with editing. The artificial intelligence helps speed up tedious or time-consuming tasks, but it does not replace the creative vision of the artists, directors, and editors. Every decision, every concept, and every visual choice is still guided by humans, which keeps the final product coherent, polished, and engaging. This is a clear contrast to Sword Art Online, where the artificial intelligence system is treated as the primary creator of the world, quests, and characters. In those cases, automation is left unchecked, producing shallow, inconsistent, and often nonsensical content. Artificial intelligence-assisted K-pop videos demonstrate how the technology can be used responsibly to support human creativity, rather than replace it. The results are high quality, purposeful, and enjoyable, unlike the mass-generated, derivative slop depicted in the show. In essence, the difference lies in oversight and intent. Artificial intelligence can be a powerful tool when used to enhance a human-driven vision, but when it is allowed to dictate the content entirely, the results are chaotic and unoriginal. Sword Art Online illustrates the dangers of relying on artificial intelligence as the main creator, while examples like artificial intelligence-assisted K-pop videos show how it can elevate, rather than diminish, artistic work. I bet most people will not even watch this far into the video and have already typed out a comment criticizing me for using artificial intelligence in my videos. They do not bother to understand the context, the oversight, or the way I actually use artificial intelligence. They just see the word artificial intelligence and assume the worst. They react immediately, without paying attention to what I am saying or how the process works. That shows how little thought goes into their judgments. That is how pathetic the Sword Art Online fans are. They defend a show that glorifies a system which generates quests, skills, and characters automatically, often stealing content and producing nonsense, yet they get outraged over someone using artificial intelligence responsibly to assist in research and formatting. They celebrate mass-produced slop in fiction but attack controlled, deliberate use in real life. Their outrage is selective, shallow, and reactionary. It highlights a bigger problem. These fans often engage with media emotionally rather than critically. They praise sloppy automation in their favorite series but are quick to police others who use tools intelligently. Their arguments are not based on logic, fairness, or understanding. They are knee-jerk defenses of fandom and blind loyalty. So yes, I expect that by this point, many will have already scrolled to the comments and started typing without paying attention. That behavior perfectly exemplifies the mindset I am criticizing: unthinking, hypocritical, and obsessed with appearances rather than substance. Their reaction is predictable, but it does not change the truth. Responsible artificial intelligence use is entirely different from the careless automation glorified in Sword Art Online. The Sword Art Online fans do not like me, and frankly, I do not care. Their attachment to the show does not change the fact that it is flawed on every level. If this mass-produced, shallow, and derivative content is their gold standard for storytelling or game design, then it says more about their taste than about me. Enjoying something that is lazy, incoherent, and full of artificial intelligence-generated slop is not a badge of discernment. It is a reflection of what they are willing to accept. I do not need or want their approval. I am not here to pander to fandoms or avoid criticism from people who are defending sloppy writing and broken world building. Liking a show that is full of stolen ideas, poorly designed systems, and shallow characters does not make someone an authority on good storytelling. Admiration for this series does not diminish the very real flaws it has, and it does not invalidate critical analysis of its failures. At this point, their dislike is irrelevant. I am discussing the show honestly and pointing out why it does not hold up under scrutiny. If they feel attacked, that is their choice. Enjoying something does not make it immune to criticism. Defending awfulness does not make it better. Their approval is neither necessary nor desirable, because the truth about the series, its lazy writing, its broken systems, and its over-reliance on artificial intelligence, is clear regardless of fandom loyalty. In short, their taste is their own problem, and my perspective does not need to bend to it. I am not here to be liked. I am here to be honest about the work itself, and if that means offending fans who accept slop as excellence, so be it. I do not even read YouTube comments, so Sword Art Online fans can leave all the negative and angry messages they want. They can post for hours, call me names, defend the show, or accuse me of being a hypocrite. It does not reach me. Their outrage is completely irrelevant. In fact, they are just screaming into a void. No matter how loud they get, it does not change the points I have made, nor does it alter the flaws of the series itself. Comments sections often feel like a battlefield, but in this case, their fury is meaningless. Their defense of a show built on lazy writing, shallow characters, and stolen or artificial intelligence-generated content does not add credibility to the series. It only shows how attached people can become to something despite its clear faults. While they rant and argue online, the reality of the problems remains unchanged, so they can keep typing, yelling, and defending the show with all the passion in the world. I am not watching. I am not engaging. Their words vanish into the digital void, accomplishing nothing except letting them vent. Criticism does not require approval, and their disapproval does not undermine it. No matter how much they protest, their outrage does not make Sword Art Online better, and it does not make me any less correct in pointing out its lazy and poorly executed use of artificial intelligence, broken world design, and hollow storytelling. Sword Art Online builds its entire premise around an advanced artificial intelligence that runs everything. The Cardinal system generates quests, manages systems, possibly creates skills, and even produces fully realized NPCs. The show frames this as progress. It treats artificial intelligence as powerful, efficient, and almost superior to human design. The entire virtual world depends on automation, and the story presents that dependence as impressive. Yet some of the same fans who praise this concept turn around and criticize real creators for using artificial intelligence as a tool. That is where the hypocrisy becomes obvious. If you celebrate a fictional world where artificial intelligence replaces human designers and generates endless content, you cannot reasonably attack someone for using artificial intelligence to assist with editing, research, or production. One is total reliance on automation. The other is limited, supervised use. The difference in scale and intent matters. In Sword Art Online, artificial intelligence is allowed to build and control the foundation of the world. It is trusted to generate content without oversight. In real life, many creators use artificial intelligence carefully, with human review and responsibility. If fans excuse unlimited automated generation in fiction but condemn practical, controlled use in reality, that is inconsistent. You cannot argue that artificial intelligence is amazing when it powers your favorite series, but unethical or lazy when someone uses it as a productivity tool. Either the technology is acceptable when used responsibly or it is not. Praising it in one context and condemning it in another, without acknowledging the difference in how it is used, exposes a double standard. If Sword Art Online is proudly pro-artificial intelligence in its narrative, then attacking others for using artificial intelligence in a far more restrained and accountable way does not make sense. It is selective outrage. And selective outrage is hard to take seriously. It is sad how artificial intelligence slop is taking over the internet. Everywhere you look, content is being mass-produced, automated, and recycled with little regard for accuracy, creativity, or meaning. Articles, videos, images, and social media posts are increasingly generated by artificial intelligence systems, often with minimal human oversight. The result is an overwhelming flood of low-quality, repetitive, and sometimes outright misleading material. It clutters platforms, confuses audiences, and lowers the standard for what is considered worthwhile content. Sword Art Online contributes to that decline as well. By glorifying a system like the Cardinal Artificial Intelligence, which generates quests, skills, and even characters automatically, the show normalizes the idea that automation can replace thoughtful design and creative effort. The series presents shallow, derivative, and sometimes nonsensical content as impressive and advanced. It reinforces the notion that quantity and spectacle are more important than quality, reasoning, or coherence. This has broader implications for critical thinking. When audiences are exposed to worlds built on automated slop and presented as high-quality content, it trains people to accept superficial or poorly considered material without questioning it. It discourages skepticism and the habit of analyzing logic, consistency, or ethics. Fans may admire the spectacle, the flashy visuals, or the sheer size of the in-world systems, but they rarely stop to consider whether the world makes sense, whether the rules are coherent, or whether the content is original. In effect, the show promotes a mindset where automation is trusted blindly and effortless outputs are celebrated. That mirrors the wider internet trend, where artificial intelligence-generated content floods feeds, reducing the incentive to think critically or evaluate sources. Sword Art Online may be fiction, but by presenting artificial intelligence-generated slop as impressive, it reinforces the same decline in discernment and analysis that we see online every day. And that wraps up this video. But do not worry, there is plenty more Sword Art Online critique coming, and the deep dive into its artificial intelligence slop is far from over. There are still countless examples of broken systems, nonsensical quests, hollow characters, and stolen content to cover, so more analysis and breakdowns will be on the way. If this kind of detailed, no-holds-barred critique is enjoyable, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to keep up with the upcoming content. There is a lot more to expose, and fans of thoughtful discussion about storytelling, game design, and responsible artificial intelligence use will want to stay tuned.